Moving into the NFC South, we have the Atlanta Falcons as a playoff team. Honestly, if they are not a playoff team, like I'm talking about like division winner, like a top 4 seed, then we have some problems because this team arguably should have been wild card teams the last couple years, and they had 3 straight 7-10 finishes. With the addition of Kirk, if they are not a playoff team, a certified playoff team, there's probably going to be some issues. And I know it's a first year head coach, first year OC in Atlanta, but the roster is just too talented.
Yeah, no, you're everything you said spot on. And what I think I want to like add on to that is here's my big issue with the way the Falcons have operated, especially this offseason. This is not the Saints fan in me. I think a lot of Falcons fans would agree with this. This is just an objective take. I think the big issue is with taking Michael Penix, you now put a lot of pressure on yourself to because because you could be saying that you could also view this the opposite way. Like I'll play contrarian. Like you could say like, well, if they have a bad season, like Michael Penix is sitting right there and right and then he's the next guy. But I look at it more like if Kirk can't make it work with what they've put around and the coaching situation. I know he's coming off a big injury, but the defense, right? There's a lot of pieces you have on defense. The O-line is fantastic. If you can't make it work with Kirk and all the coaching staff changes you made, and you have to immediately pivot to Michael Penix, and then Penix doesn't work out too, like this team has put a lot of pressure on itself, I feel like, to produce very quickly here. And if they're not going to play down there in Atlanta, they're tired of waiting. Like if they don't put together a playoff team this year, like you said, there is going to be infinite questions arisen, and it doesn't really matter that Penix is there because the whole goal of how they built this roster, especially with Kirk and the money they're paying him, was to win now. There's a lot of pressure on this team, and really, there's no two ways about that. If they don't become a playoff team like this year, like you said, there's a lot of things that probably maybe not going to change immediately, but there's a lot of questions about things that would have to change. If not this year, that upcoming year, there's a lot of things that would have to change soon. That's all I can really say. Because like you said, first year coaching staff, do you give up on them right away? I don't know, but there's a lot of questions if they don't make the playoffs. That's all there is to it.
Just one last note before we move into the next team is, I mean, you could have added a player that would have helped you now in a Byron Murphy or a defensive player who you really did need. So that I think is probably the biggest issue with that pick. Carolina Panthers, bottom feeder, right next to the New England Patriots. I think Dave Canales will elevate this offense. I really do. But I don't know if I necessarily... I do like the backfield a lot more. Chuba Hubbard, Jonathan Brooks, Rashad Penny. I think that is a major upgrade in the backfield. Yes, you have Miles Sanders, but in my opinion, he might make the roster strictly because of money owed. But Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, who am I missing? I feel like there's another Mingo. I don't know if those receivers are necessarily the guys that are really going to push them to a 6-win team. I don't think so. And especially losing Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu. Like, you just downgraded a lot on defense.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, not that look, replacing with Clowney. Clowney's nothing to scoff at. Clowney's had a great career, but he's getting to that older range. And yeah, I know he's actually coming off of a very good year last year. But again, that's also we have to consider how many other good bodies were on that D line. You're not going to have that same luxury over here, minus Derek Brown. Derek Brown's a fantastic player. Derek Brown has actually become one of the best defensive tackles in the whole league. But outside of Derek Brown, you know what I mean? Is old Clowney going to be able to produce how he produced on that Ravens line when he had everybody eating up and you're getting one-on-ones every single rep? I mean, that's kind of the thing we have to ask ourselves next. Let me be clear. The Panthers made some solid additions, but I think to your point, just all in all, the schedule that they're going to have to face. And look, if Jonathan Brooks doesn't come back healthy, like you said, there's so many questions in the running back room. And it's just like, I think my biggest thing too, I want to point out is, a lot of Panthers fans are quick to point out like, oh, well, we got Deontay Johnson. Like Deontay Johnson is going to be one of the big guys that's going to help push this offense forward. And my issue with that is we saw Deontay Johnson's attitude last year on his Steelers team that made the playoffs. Like if that's the attitude on the team, and yes, the offense was terrible and it sucked, but it doesn't really matter because attitude is attitude. If that's the attitude he had on the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm just being objective here. Do we think that he's going to bring a world-beating positive attitude over to the Carolina Panthers? I'm not leaning towards that's what's going to happen.
Well, I don't mind Deontay Johnson, but my thing is there's a reason he got traded for basically a 6th-rounder. Like, yes, maybe attitude, and I think it's a little bit more attitude than skill, but at the same time, like, if a player's that good, they're not just giving him up for that cheap. And I understand he's got money on his contract and everything like that, but I will say the reason for optimism of the Panthers is they did definitely improve the offensive line. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things is Bryce Young isn't going to feel like he's getting destroyed every play.
No, exactly. That's the big thing, at least for this year. That's your optimism, is that Bryce can hopefully actually stay upright and healthy every single game and not be limping around and looking like he wants to go home. If that happens, that's a positive step this year for the Panthers.
Moving into the New Orleans Saints, we have them as a wild card team. I think we talked about it with James, the Saints creator. We did a video with that's going to be coming out soon. Is they rectified their offensive coordinator issue, and Derek Carr, if he can play like he did the last couple weeks of the season, this may be a completely different Saints team. I think you do get a little bit of a concern with the offensive line, but overall, the Saints team, and I think James made a great point, is if you look anywhere on the field, like there is like pretty good talent. It's just, I would say the depth of how deep that talent goes is really the issue that I see with this Saints team.
No, you're spot on. And more than anything, I think we have major questions, like James said as well. We have major questions in the two most important parts of the team, which are the trenches on both sides. Like, yes, obviously, in the most optimal world, Chase Young comes, he can be that same 8.5, 9+ sack guy that he was, or not, but you know what I'm saying, like push that same rookie Chase Young that we saw where he was at his best. That's the optimal situation, right? But if Chase Young doesn't come and play really good ball, and Carl Granderson is a really good player, but he has never pushed the elite world beating tier that I want to see him get to. If those same things are the same next year, and then on top of that, nobody on the O line makes a jump. Talise Fuaga is a rookie. I expect to make an impact, but you can only expect so much from a rookie tackle before that they hit their ceiling, which I do think his ceiling is incredibly high, as you know. I just don't know how long it can take him to hit that ceiling. There's more questions than answers on the in the trenches, and whenever there's more questions and answers in the trenches, it's not a good thing. But if those answers get answered with a resounding positive yes, like we were saying, the Saints all of a sudden very much in that wild card range, very much in the playoffs discussion. But if they don't, as we'll get to in the floors, the Saints are very much one of those teams that range very widely in terms of ceiling and floor. I feel like there's kind of that's just the reality at this point.
I think another thing too, and we'll kind of talk about this with the next team, and we can just go into it right now. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the wild card team. I think the Bucks and the Saints really sit in very, very similar boats. Two coaches that we don't know, two head coaches that we don't know if they're going to be the guy. Two teams with kind of older rosters with a couple questions there. And, is it time to kind of fully hit the rebuild button? I don't know. We know these teams especially, they don't just hit the rebuild button. Like they want to stay relevant. They want to stay competitive. So you have two aging rosters and you have two new OCs, two head coaches. So the Bucks and the Saints are very, very similar. But as much as I have confidence in the Bucks, I do think that they overachieved last year. So I do think they will be in the playoff mix. I don't know if I'm ready to certify them as a playoff team, though, more of a wild card team.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think the best way we could explain it is that the Saints and the Bucks are both trying to pull off what the Los Angeles Rams did recently, right? Like they're trying to pull off that same, like, can we keep the core of the guys we've had producing together, but kind of scrap out all the in between and really make it work? And yeah, that's exactly where both these teams are at. Because, and like you said, they basically are just the exact same team at this point in terms of expectations. It's like we talked about with Mr. Bucks when we did our collab with him. Like the truth is, they're very similar. But like you said, you already covered it. We both don't know what to expect out of our coaching staffs. We both don't know what to expect out of necessarily both of the trench groups. Like there's a lot, and not that both of groups don't have good guys on them, but more questions than answers. I think the Saints and the Bucks are truly the shaking hands meme of all shaking hands memes of teams this year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's just something where it's like you can watch it this year, but that question in your mind is always going to be, did we really need to do this year? Like, did we really need to do this? Did we push something off one year just to see if it would work?
No, it's exactly that. I couldn't say it any better. That's exactly how it is.